Folks, North Dakota has billions of dollars in the Legacy Fund. The Legacy Fund, of course, for those of you who maybe aren't following this, it's a fund that was set up by, well, it was an initiated measure, actually. It was put on the ballot. It was amended. It was put on the ballot by the legislature. The voters approved it, and it created the Legacy Fund, which gets a portion of oil tax revenues and tucks them away. It gets that principal gets invested by the state investment board, which makes decisions about how it's invested and where it's invested, and it's invested in all sorts of things. And our insurance commissioner, Jon Godfread, has an idea, because everybody's talking a lot about what should we do with the Legacy Fund. And it's a complicated question because the Legacy Fund has earnings and people want to spend those earnings in different ways. The Legacy Fund also has principal that gets invested in different ways. There's a lot of different ways that you could use the Legacy Fund, not just spending its earnings, but use the fund itself to promote North Dakota and to make North Dakota a better place to live, which is the thing we all want. So Insurance Commissioner Jon Godfread has an idea where he would like a North Dakota-focused Legacy Fund policy. And John's here to talk about what that means, which I guess is my first question for you, John. What does that mean?
Well, I think the proposal that I brought forward to the State Investment Board, and we had a really good discussion about it on Friday, is to take some percentage, and the proposal that I recommended would be 10% of those Legacy Fund dollars, and so that's, as it stands right now, the Legacy Fund's at about $7 billion. So about $700 million of that Legacy Fund, and invest that here in North Dakota. And currently what we're doing is we're purchasing CDs at the Bank of North Dakota, and then the bank loans out those dollars at an interest rate that is attractive to businesses in our state, other projects, and things like that. So we have authorized up to $400 million to go to that Bank of North Dakota CD loan match program, which is a great fixed income portion of the portfolio. It does help the bank. It allows them to use those CD dollars to then leverage out into loans. Where we're at right now with that is it's about $86 million have been actually loaned out of the $400 million, and it does take time to build that. So what my proposal is bringing forward is to say, of the $400 million we authorized, let's take an additional $300 million and put that into perhaps some private equity investments, some private debt investments, and maybe even some real estate investments that that may be attractive in the state. We do those type of investments with the Legacy Fund dollars all over the country and all over the world, and this portion, in my opinion, would be targeted to North Dakota investments here in the state. And like I said, we do this. These dollars go all over the world. They go all over the country, and they purchase. We're in equity investments in a lot of other projects, other companies. We're in real estate investments all over the country and all over the world. And so these are sound investment decisions. I would just like to see some of that targeted here for the state of North Dakota, which we've got a significant capital funding gap in our state. You don't have to look too hard to realize that if a startup company is taking off, say in Fargo, and they're doing a round of capital investment or finding some capital, they generally have to go to L.A., San Francisco, Chicago, Minneapolis to find those venture capital funds to get access to it. And there's generally a pull from those communities to bring those companies to where they're at. And it's always been a struggle in North Dakota to bring that capital here and be able to find that capital for the companies that are frankly North Dakotan. And so this would be an option to perhaps solve some of those funding gaps that exist in our state. But the key part of it is, and I think where some of these ideas have struggled in the past, is that the proposal that I'm bringing forward would be with a market rate return. And so there'd have to be a return on the investment. It'd have to make sense with what our portfolio says. And it would derive money then back into the Legacy Fund through that investment, but also we'd get that multiplier effect of putting money into our economy here and growing our economy, diversifying our economy with the jobs and the other things that we're gonna see
some of those revenues come back through other streams, right? Like through sales tax, through income tax, corporate tax.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And it I think some of the discussion around it is that it is 10% too much for the state of North Dakota, and I'd argue no. I think when the people of North Dakota created this fund a decade ago, I think there was an assumption that some of these type of things would be happening, And I think there's plenty of discussion to go around about what do we spend the legacy fund earnings on, which are sent over to the legislature, and they're able to allocate them in manners that they see fit. The legislature also has the ability to spend the principal with a 2/3 vote should they need it. So this is solely talking on the investment side, and I think we can leverage some of those dollars to really make an impact in our communities and really make an impact here in the state of North Dakota, while being prudent about it. And the proposal that I brought forward, utilizes the Department of Commerce to do some vetting, because they've got their eyes on all the different projects that maybe exist in our stratosphere. Using the North Dakota Lift Committee, which was created by the legislature last session, which is made up of the Commerce Commissioner, as well as a number of private sector individuals who've got expertise in venture investing and equity investments and finance and diversification. And if you look at that Lift Committee, it is truly kind of it's a North Dakota powerhouse. I mean, the members of that committee are extremely well versed and well vetted in these ideas, and using that committee to then submit recommendations to a subcommittee of the State Investment Board, which we made up of the Lieutenant Governor, the Insurance Commissioner, the Treasurer, and the President of Bank of North Dakota, and the final approval would then go to the full State Investment Board for that allocation. And that sounds like a complex process, but it's a very similar process that we use for all the other fund managers that we have in our state that go out and do these investments, again, all over the country and all over the world. And so it seems like it's a process to me that would work and make sense for North Dakota. It would give about 4 levels of oversight on investments. So I think there's enough oversight there to make sure that we're not acting irresponsibly, and I don't think we would. And I just think it's a really exciting opportunity for North Dakota and for the State Investment Board to take a look at. And I'm happy that we got a chance to look at it on Friday, and we'll continue the discussions going forward.
Well, let's talk about one of the problems you first identified, is that North Dakota a lot of times is seen fairly as capital starved. It's hard to get people to come here to invest, particularly people from out of state. Why is that?
Well, I think it's some of our rural nature. I remember I went back about a year and a half ago. I had the opportunity to go out to Silicon Valley and meet with Plug and Play, which is the world's largest global accelerator, and it's a technology platform. I took a kind of a cohort of North Dakota out there to talk to them about, is there any chance that they'd be willing to invest into North Dakota? And we went through the first half of the day was them showing us around their operations and looking at it, and all the things that they're doing globally and locally in Silicon Valley. Had lunch, came back in the afternoon, and we were just about to get the pat on the head and say, boy, it's really cool that North Dakota's interested in this stuff. It's really neat that people from North Dakota are out here. And we went through the North Dakota slides and talked about our unmanned aerial systems, talked about our ag tech, talked about all the things that we've got going on in the Red River Valley, as well as across our state with the energy development and the different things that we've got going on in our state. And their eyes got about as big as saucers, and they're like, we had no idea that any of this stuff was going on in North Dakota. And from that point, they came out to Fargo. They've done their due diligence, and happy to say that right before the pandemic hit, Plug and Play Fargo opened up operations in Fargo, and it's got an ag tech vertical sitting there. So we've got access to the world's largest technology platform and global accelerator in Fargo. And so I think when people come and they're able to get on the ground and take a look and see, they can see the opportunities. The one thing that I'm afraid of is that we're as a state and as a state investment board, we're missing those opportunities. We're sending these dollars all over the country and all over the world, and those communities are getting that multiplier effect, and they're getting to have that growth in their economy, and we're not seeing that here.
I mean, we talk all the time about the legacy fund being invested. I'm not sure how many people in the general public grasp how it's invested. I mean, and a lot of it, you're right, it's overseas. In fact, I had a Fargo area attorney who wrote a guest post on my blog, just as a North Dakota concerned citizen. He's really concerned about the amount of investments in China. And I have a spreadsheet from the legacy fund investment showing there's well over $100 million of legacy fund dollars that are invested in China. I think that those if we're going to invest in North Dakota. Now, what's the one of the problems with sort of government picking investments is a lot of time, and particularly if we're trying to drive it with I think it's fair to say a political outcome, right? I don't mean that as a pejorative. We're obviously part of this is, hey, let's help North Dakota. That's a policy outcome. a lot of times the government's just not very good at that. We look at a lot of economic development boondoggles where it's just kind of somebody comes in and they make pie in the sky promises and they get a bunch of money and they get a bunch of tax breaks, and as soon as they're not on the dole anymore, they pack up and leave. How's this distinct from that?
Well, I think the big difference is that North Dakota Lift Committee. That's made up primarily of private sector individuals who, again, have experience in this arena, and are looking, I think, to better North Dakota. And so I think having that viewpoint is important. And when you talk about the political outcome, I can certainly understand that. But I think at the end of the day, Rob, this is a political fund. I mean, it was voted on by the people. The people put it into place.
Like I said, I was not using that term pejoratively. And I know people say politics and it means a negative thing. I mean, this is an inherently political thing. I mean, the legacy fund is controlled by the government. Politics is the means by which we decide who gets to decide, basically. And we're trying to affect, doing this is explicitly for the benefit of North Dakota. I mean, that's the intent here.
Yeah, and I think, I think there are, depending on how deep you get down into government, people want to use that political or politicization of this fund in a negative connotation. And at the end of the day, again, politics is access. So I serve on the state investment board. The lieutenant governor serves on the state investment board. The treasurer serves on the state investment board. So there's a number of elected officials that serve there. And the reality is, if we were to make mistakes, if there's something happen on the state investment board, you can almost assure yourself that it's going to become a topic of the insurance commissioner race or the treasurer's race. It probably be a piece of the governor's race as well. And so the people have access to those positions. And I think, this is a fair response to some of the concerns that I think are being highlighted about some of the investments that the legacy fund dollars are going to. I think as we dig into this and look at, why is it okay and why do we support those equity investments in other places, but we don't support them here? And the common response
China,
we get to
in
that
Venezuela, these are maybe not so great parts of the world right now.
Well, and I think we're becoming much more sensitive as a state and as a nation to where some of those dollars are going. I think the current administration has highlighted some of the issues with, U.S. dollars going into some of these nations that perhaps aren't as friendly to us as we'd like, and they're pulling back some of those investments. So I think it's a prudent review to do of ourselves to look at what are we doing with our dollars. And again, that's not to say, it doesn't make sense to diversify some of these dollars and put them in global investments, because that does protect and help diversify. But when you get down to it, again, there should be a portion that should be allowed to go into North Dakota, or we should be targeting into North Dakota, because that's what this fund is ultimately for, is to create legacies and to create growth and to create opportunities in this state. And we can do that by targeting some investments here in North Dakota that will then give a return to the legacy fund and kind of continue that cycle going forward. And so it's, this isn't talking about legacy fund earnings. This isn't talking about, decisions the legislature is going to make, or the people may come back and run another measure. This is solely on, we've got the money in the fund and now we're investing that out, we're investing it out into the world. Let's do a portion of it here.
Yeah, it's right. And hopefully those investments in North Dakota would kick off their own revenues, right? Their own returns, and add to the principal or to the money available for whatever else we might decide to use the legacy fund for. This is really more of a shift in investment strategy than they plan to quote unquote spend the legacy fund. You're not really spending it. It's a little bit of a shift in how we invest a portion of the legacy fund, a very small portion of the legacy fund. Let me ask you this, and I really like this idea. I think it's a great idea, absolutely. One thing that sometimes gives me pause is there's obviously, and I don't want to say it gives me pause, there's going to be an opportunity cost for this, right? Mm-hmm. Which is to say, typically, currently the investment strategy is, we have a state investment board and we have managers and all this stuff who are making the best decisions they can to get the best return on investment. So it's almost like me. Like if I have my own private investments and I'm looking out in the world and I'm saying, well, this company looks like a good investment and that company, it's basically that, but writ large with billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And so the motivation there is not necessarily let's hope North Dakota. The motivation is let's get the biggest return on our buck. You're saying, well, let's take a portion of it. There's a cost to that, right? Because the best investment for those dollars, or the best return, might not be from a company in North Dakota. It might be from a company in Michigan or a company in Canada or Mexico or something like that. So there's an opportunity cost here, right?
I mean, potentially, but I guess I would say that our investment managers that we've got using right now are part of other global funds, and it gets kind of rolled into the other venture capital investments and where the capital is on the coast generally in this country. And so I would argue they probably don't have visibility on some of the companies that are existing
on
here
what's
in North
happening
Dakota,
in Bismarck or what's happening in
I think
Forks.
I can see the argument, and I think that there very well could be a case made there where, let's say we'd get a 12% return if we do it over XYZ, but we may get a 10% return here in North Dakota. And my argument would be if we take that 10% return here in North Dakota and take that, that reduction perhaps, we're going to get the multiplier effect that should make up the remaining piece of that. And that to me is good for the economy. And we've now got the ability to model that kind of unquantifiable number through some of the REMI modeling, which is available through the Department of Commerce and the Bank of North Dakota. So we're able to kind of put, again, it's projection, so it's not going to be perfect, but we're able to put a quantifiable number into that place to say, okay, this investment would lead to this kind of return plus this kind of multiplier effect. And I think all those things would be taken into consideration when the Department of Commerce and the LIFT Committee are reviewing those potential investments. And that's also not to say I think we've got some companies here in North Dakota that would beat the returns that we're already investing in. And so, and I'll use one example is Bushel out of Fargo. I mean, this is an ag tech company that is blowing the doors off, and it really would have been an opportunity for us to get in, early into that company and be able to derive some pretty nice returns for the legacy fund into the legacy fund. Instead, Bushel had to go to Chicago, they had to go to LA, they had to go to New York to close out their capital rounds to be able to do what they want to do here in North Dakota. And it's really, in my opinion, it's a missed opportunity. And I think, bringing this discussion forward and bringing this idea forward to the State Investment Board, I think is one. I truly believe in the idea. I think it's a good idea, and I think you got to remember the legacy fund is different than a lot of the other funds that are managed by the State Investment Board. There's the PERS Retirement Fund, there's the TFFR Teacher Retirement Fund, there's the Insurance Regulatory Trust Fund. All those have a back-end liability of either an individual's retirement or department operations or the workforce safety funds in there, so the injured workers are at the back end of that fund. The legacy fund's back-end liability is North Dakota. And how do we benefit North Dakota? And I still think that this is an exciting opportunity, and it's prudent for North Dakota to do this with these dollars because I think that's what the people expect.
I think you're right. And again, the multiplier, I don't think that can be understated. You say, okay, I'm going to get a 12% return if I invest in this company in, say, Michigan. We're going to get a 10% return if we invest in this company in, say, Valley City. But on top of that 10%, maybe you're also going to create 30 jobs in Valley City. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're also going to bring a company in that's going to make other sorts of investments. They're going to be buying supplies in Valley City. They're going to be paying taxes in Valley City. They're going to be doing all those things. That's the multiplier effect. I think that's brilliant. Tell me, what sort of project? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish your thought on that.
Well, no, and I think it also, the core underlying portion of the legacy fund is that we want to have an economy and money there if and when oil ever dries up, right? And so these investments can be used to diversify our economy into whatever the next sector is we're going to have, And so I think that's an important piece of it too, is that this is meant to drive diversification, and that's good for the state. That's good for everybody. It's good for the legacy fund. And again, I'm having a hard time seeing where the downside is in this idea.
I am too. Really, diversification is the political quandary for the ages in North Dakota.
Yep.
When going back to the Schaefer administration, going back to the Senate, we've been talking about this for so long, and I think we've made some progress. But nobody, and I don't want to make it sound like this is like the silver bullet that's going to fix it, but economic diversification, even before, because everybody talks about oil all the time, and that's true, but even if, outside of oil, it's agriculture, right? And listen, I love agriculture, and I love oil, and I love coal, and I love all the things that we're currently doing, but the reality is those are commodity-driven economies, and they can be a little bit of a roller coaster. If crop prices tank, or we have a bad growing season because we have a drought or a fire or whatever, terrible weather, then that hits our economy hard. We're a state with a lot of up and downs, economically speaking. Now, the way you address that is diversification. If we're doing more different things, if we're doing all the oil and all the coal and all the agriculture and all the ranching, we're doing all of that. And then we're also doing all these other things, like maybe some fun software stuff, maybe some industrial stuff, maybe some manufacturing stuff. If we're doing all of that too, then if those other sectors have a tough year, well, maybe these other sectors will be going well. And overall, we're going to increase the amount of opportunity available in our state. And less importantly, maybe make our tax revenues a little bit more stable. I'm more concerned with opportunity for people than I am worried about the government getting its cut. But
I don't disagree.
I mean, the thing is, if people are doing well and they have lots of opportunity, then the government part of it kind of takes care of itself. So that's really what we're focused on, is we want to have lots of opportunity, so that if agriculture is maybe not employing as many people, or oil's not employing as many people, there's other things you can do in North Dakota. You don't just have to leave. Which by the way, is the secret of our low unemployment rate, right? I mean, we always get credit for having a low unemployment rate. And I mean, in some ways that's good, but in other ways, what happens is when people lose their jobs in North Dakota, they don't stick around, they leave. Yeah. And that's not a good thing.
Well, and I think to your point about, we've been working on this for decades, and trying to figure out a way to diversify our economy. And I think the legislature has certainly made some strides, but I think it gets back to the one area that you touched on earlier is we're capital starved, and we haven't quite figured out a good way, either through legislatively or through other avenues, to address that capital shortage that we see, which again, that truly will impact diversification, and this is one option that can be a direct help to that. And I'm not going to, like I said, it's not the silver bullet. It's not going to solve all our problems, but getting more capital into our market, into our players, only leads to further diversification, only leads to further opportunities, and that's really one area that we've struggled with as a state, because it's a tough idea to get through, especially a legislature when they're generally dealing with grants and tax exemptions and things like that. But it's a common investment strategy that frankly we use, again, all over the state investment board, all over the funds that we use.
Well, it's
we're invested in equity markets all over the place.
Everything else we've tried to do in the past is just kind of giving people money, right? I mean, we try tax exemptions, we try tax exemption, like that was a big sort of controversial thing, doing tax exemptions for angel investments and things like that. I mean, they're all aimed at this problem, but they all have inherent problems and limitations of themselves. I think this is capital. North Dakota has amassed a huge billions of dollars worth of capital. It's just sitting there. And we have it invested in all sorts of different ways. And all you're saying is, let's find investments in North Dakota. Let's find North Dakota companies and North Dakota entrepreneurs and North Dakota people to invest in, still making sure they're good investments and still making sure that, while they're not risk-free, that we have a high probability of getting a return. That's what we ought to be focused on. I think it's brilliant.
But the reality is we take these risks, again, all over the world, all over the country, and I think we got to get over the fact that oftentimes when we have these discussions, and I'll use an analogy that I just heard the other day. If you come here, if you fly here on a plane, you're an expert, but if you drive there in a car, you're not considered an expert. And so when we have these meetings and have these fund managers come forward to us, I think there's an inherent, whether that's a North Dakota,
there's
our problem in the way we consider ourselves.
Thing. There's kind of a self-loathe, and it permeates all that. Where we always think, like, if we're hiring a new university president or something, right? We always think, well, we got to do a national search, and we got to import somebody from New Hampshire or Texas or something, because they're from somewhere else, they must be smarter than we are. And I don't get that. There are so many brilliant people here in North Dakota that can. And
this recognizes that, and that's some of the headwinds we've got, is the fact that we've got the expertise to do it here. I mean, you don't have to look too far. I mean, you can look at every community. We've got great investment professionals. We've got great folks who understand this and operate on a global stage. I mean, look at Emerging Prairie. Look at the Valley Prosperity Partnership. Look at some of these groups we've got in the state that they do this on a global stage, and so we can tap into their resources and their knowledge, and frankly, they're excited about the opportunity. They're excited about, how do I give back to my state? How can volunteering on the LIFT committee board to to do some of these things that benefit our state is a great option for them to do some public service, which is what they want to do.
And to bring back some of those North Dakotans who have left because the opportunities and the fields that they've chosen weren't necessarily here. And heck, let's make some new North Dakotans. Let's attract entrepreneurs and people who want to start up. Let's have them come here, right? And then they can live here and put down roots and raise children in this wonderful place that we love so much and become North Dakotans too. It's a great idea. And
I'll tell you, with the access to plug and play, which I encourage you to do more looking at, and I'm happy to talk more about it. But there's over 300 plus corporate partners that are members of plug and play, and so what that does, that gets them access to kind of the accelerator and the startups as they're working through their process and kind of getting their ideas ready for market. We have that in Fargo now. So we have access to all those corporate partners that will come into Fargo and they're partnering with the Grand Farm and being the first autonomous farm, and the UAS stuff we've got going up in Grand Forks. We're going to have so many corporate partners coming into the Fargo area and through plug and play and into our state, looking at these startups, and we're going to attract new startups that are going to come into the community, because to be a part of plug and play means you're part of the cream of the crop of startup and venture ideas. And we've got access to that now sitting in Fargo, and so really I don't think there's any time better than right now to look at these kind of capital equity investments utilizing North Dakota dollars for North Dakotans, because unlike any time we've had in history, we've got access to some of the greatest global players sitting right here in the state, and I think we're gonna have some tremendous opportunities coming forward, and I hope we're able to take advantage of that by again leveraging these legacy fund dollars, which I think that's what the people of North Dakota wanted these to be used for. They wanted to be used to expand our economy, to diversify our economy, and to get us a return on our investment.
Yeah.
Usually when you go to the legislature, they're asking for, like you said, a grant, a tax credit, or something along those lines, and that's a giveaway, maybe too strong of a word, because there's multiplier effects when you do those kind of economic development initiatives. But with these kind of investments, we have skin in the game, and there's an investment there and a return coming back to the legacy fund and back to the state. That is different than a grant program.
Well, we could measure this, right? I mean, because we could cordon off these investments on a spreadsheet in 5 years hence and say, what was our return?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's what all the other fund managers do that come forward. They'll come to the report to the board, generally on an annual basis, and say, okay, you gave us $250 million to invest in the global equity market. Here are the returns we saw. And, the market was soft here, but we made a recovery here. And, by the way, if you give us another $100 million, we've got some unique investments that you can take a part of. And generally that's how it works. And this would be no different. This would be, the investment advisory committee that's proposed reporting to the board saying, you gave us a $100 million allocation. Here's the return we've seen on it. And by the way, we've got another $100 million sitting in the pipeline of other projects that look promising. And so if you give us a $100 million allocation, we'll be able to make those investments and come back and report. I mean, there's levels of oversight here, which again is consistent with all the other fund managers that we do and all the other fund management that we do. It would just be done here in North Dakota.
The accountability portion of it is really, because again, we can put an actual number on it. It's so hard if we do a tax credit for angel fund. It's hard to sort of navigate that sort of policy and say, well, what was our bang for the buck? What did we get back? Here we could say we got an 8% rate of return on these investments. We maybe could have gotten 11% if we'd invested other ways. And then you can even argue like, okay, well, maybe we didn't get the return on investment, but we also, invested in these companies, which did these specific things, which created these specific jobs and had these specific impacts on their local governments and their local economies and their local communities. It's great. What are the next steps? You've proposed this.
Where so I brought it forward on Friday to our.
Is this something the legislature would have to approve?
No, and so through the Constitution, the State Investment Board has the discretion to invest the legacy fund principal, right? And so that's in the Constitution. So I would argue we've got the authority to do this. It would be. It's really honestly, and we do this all the time. We look at different fund managers. We hire different fund managers to manage different portions of the portfolio. This would be another fund, the 33rd fund manager, if you will, but it'd be, operated through the Department of Commerce, through the LIFT committee, and through the State Investment Board subcommittee, kind of operating as that fund manager. And so there's due diligence that certainly goes into it. So I proposed it on Friday. We're going to talk about it again in October, and we're going to do some due diligence and kind of do the traditional almost fund manager interview. And so I'm hopeful that we'll continue to, gain some support and gain some momentum behind this, because it is a departure from, what we generally do. Generally, we bring in a high-powered fund manager that comes in and we give them an allocation. This is a touch different because it's done here in North Dakota and it's done with North Dakotans. And I'm still of the mindset, and I'm passionate about the fact that we've got the expertise here to do this here, to benefit our citizens and benefit our state. And this truly makes sense to me, especially when you're talking about legacy fund dollars, because again, it's the people's fund that they passed a decade ago, and I think they're expecting to see some kind of this activity happening going forward. Otherwise, the real threat, Rob, is I think we may see another initiated measure. I think there is some discussion around, what has the legacy fund done for me? And I think there's plenty of blame to go around on either why we haven't told that story well enough, or what those earnings are going for, or what our investments are doing. And I'm not necessarily interested in having that blame game. This is a solution to that addresses that directly, and I think it's a good idea for the state.
And it's worth keeping in mind two things. A, this is not about spending the legacy fund.
No.
This is just a little bit change in a strategy of how we invest it. And B, this is not the only thing we can do with the legacy. I think sometimes people think there's going to be just like one thing that we do with the legacy fund, and that's a little silly. We can do lots of different things. We can use the way we invest the legacy fund to promote North Dakota's interests, and then we can use the earnings from the legacy funds for other things, which is probably a debate for another podcast. So this isn't like a one thing. This is how we're going to spend the legacy fund. It's not spending it. It's just a little bit of a change in how we invest it, and there's still lots of other things we could do with it. So this doesn't really preclude anything else that we might possibly do with the legacy fund. And you're right. I think I called the legacy, some of the legacy fund hoarders, right? And my argument was I don't want to just go out and spend money discriminately. At some point, we need to define what we're doing with these billions of dollars, or somebody's going to come along and define it for us. Some billionaire in Texas, again, is going to fund an initiated measure, and then North Dakotans are going to have to live with how we're going to spend that money. So,
well, and that's the fear that I got, because, and again, this is a responsibility that's been given to the state investment board, and I think it's absolutely prudent to look at this, and I think it's prudent to do this because, again, I think there's a real strong possibility that if we don't start doing some of these things, which this investment proposal again continues to grow the legacy fund. It's tweaking how our allocation and tweaking how we invest these dollars, which we currently do all over the country, all over the world, but putting them here in North Dakota, which is a benefit, and it doesn't have anything to do with the earnings. Those earnings still go to the legislature. They can do with what they want, and that's what they're entitled to do. They still have access to the principal should they need it. This is really just an investment strategy, and how do we leverage those dollars to better North Dakota?
John, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Anytime.